r/AskReddit. Posted by Reddit user iwanttofuckkusanagi. Forest Rangers, what are your unexplainable and downright creepy stories? One of my best buds from college was a geologist major that ended up becoming a ranger in the southeast US. I haven't spoken to him in years, as is the case with age, but I remember about 8 or 9 years back he was telling me about an old married couple that he had recently helped out. He had seen them come to park several days in a row and found out they were visiting from out west, and they had gotten engaged there decades prior. They had been searching for a spot they'd taken pictures of where he popped the question, but were having trouble. After looking at the pics and figuring out roughly where they were trying to get to, he escorted them in his vehicle, then hiked with them to where he thought it would be. They found it, and he left them there and went back to a station at the entrance. He said he got a weird feeling once he got back, and felt like he needed to wait to see them whenever they left. Well, once it came time to lock up at night, he still hadn't seen them leave, so he reported it, left his assistant to wait at the shack at the entrance, and went back to where he left them. He found both of them lying down, spooning along the riverbank. Neither were alive. He called the cops, went through the 9 yards, and went home. The police were able to disclose to him their identities, but weren't sure of anything else initially. Later, he learned that the wife was terminally ill with cancer, and they had both committed suicide by ingesting some sort of chemical pill combination medley. They just chose to do it where they had gotten engaged at. My bud wasn't torn up about it. He was obviously sad for them dying, but he said he thought they hadn't asked for help earlier because they didn't want anyone thinking they helped kill them. My cousin is with the Forest Service in Montana, Wyoming area, and I decided to go up there to literally test the waters. She does hydrology and has to ride out the middle of nowhere to test streams and snow runoff to ensure no contaminants. I thought that sounded fun and wanted to do a bit of a tour with her. We were going to have a camp out there for 2 nights, so we packed up all our gear in saddlebags, our saddle bundles, and started out. The first day and night was amazing. Beautiful scenery and amazing air quality. It really is so peaceful out there. I love that area and wish to go up there more often. Anyway, we started out the second day and my cousin said, "Do you want to see something weird?" Of course I said yes, so she led me on a bit of a side journey into this tiny little ravine. We ended up traveling about 2 hours away from the actual path laid out. At the very end of this fold, she dismounts and tells me to get off my horse too. We tie them up in this gorgeous little clearing, and she tells me to follow this tiny little wildlife path and bring our little rechargeable radios. It's one of those you can plug in or wind up, and it also acts as a lantern if you really need it to, but that kills the batteries quickly. I do, and out in the middle of fucking nowhere, there is a huge coil of wire sticking out from the ground. The wire itself was not weirdly large, like some buried transmission wire, but small, like 10 or 12 gauge wiring for a house. It trailed off into a bush and trees, so naturally, I decided to follow the damn thing out of curiosity. My cousin trails behind me as I do, and this wire, after coming straight up from the ground, is strung across limbs of trees and then back down to the ground. Then it snakes around rocks and finally dead ends into an outlet. That outlet is mounted on the side of a desk. It looks like a school teacher's desk from when it was growing up, with a metal base and a pseudo wood plastic thing on top. No chair, no building, no nothing. Just this outlet and this desk. I am staring confused as hell at this desk in the middle of the forest when my cousin takes the radio, pulls out the cord, and plugs it into the outlet. That fucker then lit up and started blaring static. The wire was being fed from somewhere. Now, the place we were had no road access, no buildings for many miles, and no other people around. And yet, there was a live outlet. Weird as shit. No spooky jump scares or bodies. Just one lone powered desk in the middle of the woods. Ex-Ranger here. We had a group of frat boys making way too much noise. We came by twice, and the second time, I told them it was their last warning. Not only is it rude for other campers to be so loud, it's exceptionally dangerous. Everyone knows that local mountain lions are attracted to loud noises at night, and these ghost cats, as they are called, can creep right up on you without you hearing or seeing them. Whatever you do, don't leave your tent tonight. If you hear anything, don't make a sound. We went back to the station, grabbed the lion pelt from the internship center, and night vision goggles. Head rangers had to blow what was left on the budget at the end of the previous year. Once they were all in their tents, we crept into the campsite and made fake lion tracks everywhere. We set up the lion pelt propped up over some sticks. The other ranger called out the PA from some distance doing a fake lion call, slowly getting closer and closer. I pulled the Jeep forward like we were arriving on scene and got out, turned on my mag light, and illuminated the silhouette of the lion pelt. Because I was moving so quickly, the shadow of the lion appeared to be moving. At this point, the frat boys were losing it. Jim, the other ranger, shouted, "Stay in your tents," followed shortly by, "She's coming around us." And then, "There's another one." And finally, "Let's get the fuck out of here." At that point, we turned off the flashlights and grabbed the lion pelt in the darkness and jumped in the Jeep and sped off. Just after sunrise, they started peeking out of their tents. Nobody was brave enough to get out until about 8:30. When they saw the huge paws and claw prints everywhere, they really freaked out. Love, your tax dollars at work. I was a park ranger a few years ago. I loved everything nature, so the job seemed perfect for me, right? It was my first month there. Things had been swimming along pretty nicely. I enjoyed my coworkers and my superiors. I was on night watch. The shack was pretty quaint. I had one partner with me, so I didn't feel too alone. It wasn't until this day that I felt true terror doing any job I've ever done. I walked through my normal routine, doing my daily rounds, doing my checks, and all of a sudden I noticed the pathway. It seemed so much more unkempt, like the other rangers were avoiding it purposely. I decided to take an initiative as a new guy. Big mistake. I ended up almost lost, walking that trail for what felt like hours. And before I knew it, I started hyperventilating, not knowing whether I was going north or south, east or west. I was indefinitely lost. When I pulled out my compass, it just spun as if it was defective. Not knowing what to do, I turned around and tried to sprint back. Every call-in I made, every safety feature us rangers had to keep us safe, failed. I couldn't get a hold of anybody. Eventually, I made it back to the main road, where I started hyperventilating, and eventually, I fainted. It wasn't until about a half hour later that my partner found me in the middle of the road, passed out. He called for backup, and once we had more guys on the ground, he tried to wake me up. Initially, I woke up scared and afraid for my life. Once I saw a familiar face, I quickly calmed down. He explained to me that the road I had taken has always led to weird coincidences happening to every ranger that walks through them, which is why they're pretty much unkempt and left alone. He explained that many of the experiences that I experienced were very common amongst new rangers, hence why we don't go through that path. It's been a couple years, and I still don't go down that path. I can't explain the amount of dread and anxiety that I had going through there. As a skillful woodsman and a lover of all things nature, I can tell you right now that whatever is in there isn't natural, or at least is maybe paranormal. Not a ranger, but I used to be in a group that's somewhat like the Scouts, so we spent a lot of time in the woods, and some weird shit happened often, but most of the time, it was easy to explain. One thing happened though, that to this day, scares the living shit out of me. I was a leader for the age group 8-10-year-olds, and we were out camping on a trip. It was the first year we stayed on that terrain, and it was huge. Normally, we tend to explore a majority of the terrain before the kids arrive, so that we're aware of any possible danger spots to avoid. This time, it was impossible. Every camp, we have what we call a night game. It's usually a scary game in which kids have to complete several tasks, while the leaders scare the ever-loving shit out of them. Obviously, we had one also during that camp. We masked up as monsters and hid out into the woods, close to checkpoints they had to pass. While running in between checkpoints, I found an open stretch of forest with little to no foliage, so it was ideal for chasing after them. There was no room to hide besides the trees. I couldn't use my flashlight, or they'd be able to see me from miles away. It was dark, like the unsettling kind of dark that plays tricks on your eyes, and you start imagining things that aren't real. During my stay there, I saw a shadow that was around my size running past me a few times. I couldn't see it very well. I just assumed I was imagining things because nothing was there when I turned my flashlight on. The game was nearing its end, and I saw the shadow again. This time, I could see it vaguely standing near a tree not too far away from me. I thought it was one of the other leaders trying to scare kids, and decided to go over there as it was about time to go back. I aimed my flashlight towards the tree, and while getting closer, I noticed that there was indeed someone standing there, dressed in what looked like a torn-up burlap sack, and their head covered with a few white plastic bags that looked like they were tied together. I started to feel pure dread. Something felt really off. I asked if everything was okay, but they didn't respond. The only thing I heard was this weird sound that sounded like someone knocking on wood. Nevertheless, I went a bit closer until I was about 10 meters away from this person. The knocking sound turned out to be that person smacking his head repeatedly onto the tree, and I noticed he looked like a male. He was barefoot and his arms and legs were covered with crusted mud. His hands were in a weird cramped position. I was convinced that it was just one of the other leaders pulling a prank, so I told him to knock it off. He slowly turned his head and started walking towards me. Something inside me told me to run. It didn't matter if it was just some stupid prank, and I ran away scared for nothing. If this wasn't a prank, it felt like I was in serious danger, so I ran as fast as I could. I heard him running after me, but I didn't want to turn around to look, as I'd probably run into a tree. I arrived back at the campsite, and every single person that could be dressed like that was already there. They couldn't have gotten there before me, and if they did, they sure as hell didn't have time to change into their regular clothes. Still, I told them, and that they gave me a good scare with that. They just looked weird at me, thinking I was trying to scare them, and we left it at that. The next day I wanted to go check it out. Who knows, maybe some weirdo ate the wrong mushroom and might be out there dying from hypothermia. I took someone with me just in case, but there was nothing but endless trees. We arrived at the tree I saw the person banging his head at, and there was a dead, skinned, decomposing rabbit nailed to the tree. We called the cops. They looked around quickly and brushed it off as a prank from another scouting group or some kids nearby in a town, and we left it at that. We didn't notice anything weird after that,